The rancher advanced toward the river, and the Apache woman stopped him. Crossing alone means death. The wind whispered across the dry grass, carrying the faint smell of dust and wildflowers. Eli Harper, a tall and strong rancher with weathered skin and eyes that had seen years of hardship, adjusted the brim of his hat as he rode his horse along a narrow trail. His boots dug into the stirrups, steady and confident, and the reins rested loosely in his hands. He was used to traveling alone, relying only on his instincts, his experience, and the rhythm of his own heartbeat to guide him. Eli's ranch lay miles away, hidden in the folds of the hills beyond the river. The land was beautiful, but it could be unforgiving. Cattle roamed freely, and the wild plains had their own rules. Eli had spent most of his life here, learning from every harsh winter, scorching summer, and unexpected storm. He knew the songs of the wind, the whispers of the trees, and the paths of the animals. Yet despite his experience, the journey ahead filled him with a quiet unease he could not name. As he rode, Eli scanned the horizon. The river ahead was distant but unmistakable, winding through the plains like a silver ribbon. Its waters glimmered in the early morning light, serene at first glance, but Eli knew better. Rivers in this land could be deceiving. They could swell without warning, hiding sharp rocks and swift currents beneath calm surfaces. Still, he was determined. Supplies were running low, and he had to reach the other side to check on his cattle and ensure everything at the ranch was in order. He had faced dangerous crossings before, and he had always succeeded. Today would be no different. The trail grew narrower, and the horse picked its way carefully over uneven ground. Birds darted through the air, their wings slicing the golden light. Eli thought about the cattle waiting at the ranch, and the long hours he would spend mending fences and repairing shelters. He thought about the quiet nights, when the only sounds were the low murmur of the river and the distant calls of coyotes. That solitude had always been comforting, a reminder that he was capable and self-reliant. But today, something felt different. A tension lingered in the air, subtle but undeniable. As he approached a small rise, Eli noticed fresh tracks in the dust. Human footprints, cautious and light, led toward the river. He slowed his horse, curiosity and caution both stirring within him. In all his years on the plains, he had learned to pay attention to signs like this. Sometimes they meant nothing, other times they were warnings he could not ignore. He followed the tracks with his eyes, tracing them to the edge of a clearing where the river's first glimmer appeared. The water looked calm, reflecting the sky above, yet Eli's gut told him it was not as peaceful as it seemed. The wind shifted, carrying with it the scent of smoke and wood. He frowned. That smell was unusual this far from any settlement. Eli's horse snorted, ears flicking back as if sensing the same unease. He slowed his pace further, moving with the caution of a man who had learned that pride could be dangerous. The plains were beautiful, yes, but they had their own dangers. Sudden storms, hidden ravines, and animals that could strike without warning. And then there were the people, rare travelers like himself, who might be friend or foe. Eli's hand rested on the leather strap of his satchel, where he carried tools and supplies. Today, he would need all his wits about him. The river grew closer, and the sound of water became louder, a soft but persistent murmur. Eli could see how it carved through the land, the current swift and strong in some places, slow and calm in others. He scanned the riverbanks, noting the rocks and fallen trees, the bends and shallow spots. Crossing it would be challenging. Yet he felt confident. He had crossed rivers before, and he knew the rhythms of water, the signs of hidden danger. Confidence was part of who he was, a shield against fear that had kept him alive through harsh winters and scorching summers alike. But then he saw her, a figure standing at the edge of the clearing, framed by the rising sun and the shimmering river behind her. Eli reined in his horse, instinctively wary. The woman was tall and graceful, with dark hair braided neatly down her back. Her eyes were sharp, alert, and unwavering as they met his. She carried herself with the quiet strength of someone who belonged to the land, someone who understood its secrets and respected its dangers. There was a calmness in her presence, but also an unmistakable authority. She spoke, her voice steady and clear across the distance. Crossing alone means death. The words hung in the air like a warning bell, simple but heavy with meaning. Eli's heart quickened, not out of fear, but out of curiosity and surprise. He had expected the plains to be empty, to meet only the wind, the river, and the occasional deer or coyote. He had not expected to encounter someone here, someone who seemed to know more about the river than he did. For a moment, Eli studied her. There was no sign of trickery, no hint of malice. Her eyes were serious, focused, and filled with knowledge he could sense but not yet understand. She was an Apache woman, he realized, someone connected to the land in ways he could only guess. She had a presence that commanded attention, not through force, but through the quiet certainty of someone who had survived many years in this unforgiving land. Her words were a challenge and a lesson all at once. Eli adjusted his hat and spoke, keeping his tone casual but careful. "I've crossed rivers before. I know how to handle myself." His pride, long a part of him, made him reluctant to show hesitation. He was a rancher, a man of the plains, and he had faced dangers before. Yet there was something about her words, her calm warning, that made him pause. The river was not ordinary. He could feel its power even from here, as the wind carried the scent of water and mud. Something told him that crossing alone might indeed be more dangerous than he had imagined. The woman took a step closer to the water, gesturing with her hand. "This river is not what it seems. You may see calm water, but there are currents that can pull a man under in seconds. Hidden rocks, deep holes, and sudden whirlpools wait for those who do not respect the land." Her voice was steady, but there was a weight to it, a knowledge born of experience and survival. She was offering him a choice: heed her warning or risk the river alone. Eli nodded slowly, the first signs of humility touching him. He had always trusted his own judgment, relied on his strength and skills. But there was wisdom in her words, a reminder that even the strongest man could falter when facing nature's hidden dangers. He glanced at his horse, who seemed tense as well, ears flicking nervously toward the river. Perhaps even the animal sensed the risk that Eli had not fully acknowledged. For the first time in a long while, Eli considered the idea of guidance. Not because he was weak, but because he understood that knowledge could save a life. He studied the river again, noting the darker patches of water and the sudden changes in current near the rocks. The woman was right. It was more dangerous than it appeared. A wrong step, a misjudgment, and the consequences could be fatal. The wind picked up, carrying with it the distant rumble of thunder from over the mountains. Clouds were gathering, dark and heavy, hinting at a storm that could swell the river even further. Eli's mind raced. He had to reach the other side before the river became truly impassable, yet he also had to respect the woman's warning. Pride was a dangerous companion in these lands. Experience alone was not enough when nature itself seemed to conspire against a man. The woman's gaze did not waver. "I can guide you. You may survive if you listen. You may die if you ignore me." Her tone was firm, yet not threatening. It was matter of fact, the honesty of someone who had seen too many lives lost to arrogance and haste. Eli took a deep breath, feeling the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. He had a choice, and the choice was clear. Survival often required listening, learning, and trusting those who had walked the land longer than he had. Eli dismounted slowly, his boots sinking slightly into the soft dirt. He approached her cautiously, eyes fixed on hers. "All right," he said finally, "I'll listen. Tell me what I need to know." For the first time, he felt a mix of humility and curiosity, a rare combination that made him feel alive and alert. The plains had taught him many lessons, but today promised one that was different, a lesson not just in survival, but in respect, patience, and the quiet strength of knowledge passed from one person to another. The woman nodded once, a small, approving gesture. Then we begin. Watch closely, move carefully, respect the river and it may let you pass. She stepped to the side, allowing him to follow. The river stretched before them, vast and beautiful, yet dangerous in ways that were not immediately visible. Eli felt a shiver of anticipation and fear mingle in his chest. This journey would be unlike any he had taken before, and he understood, deep down, that the choices he made now could determine whether he returned to his ranch safely, or not at all. And so the rancher, confident yet cautious, and the Apache woman, calm and wise, began the first steps toward the river together. The plains watched silently, the wind carrying the whispers of old lessons, waiting to see if man and nature could meet in understanding rather than struggle. The wind had picked up, carrying a faint chill as the sun climbed higher in the sky. The river's surface sparkled in the morning light, but beneath that shimmer lurked dangers Eli had never fully seen before. He followed the Apache woman cautiously, his horse moving slowly beside him. She did not speak at first, letting him observe the land, the river, and the subtle changes in the currents. Every step felt deliberate, as if she were teaching without words, guiding him through lessons that were hidden in the smallest details of the wilderness. Eli had always been confident in his abilities. He had crossed rivers before, fought storms, and faced wild animals. But something about this woman, the quiet certainty in her eyes, made him pause. He had never met anyone like her, someone so connected to the land that it felt as if she could read the river's thoughts. Every movement she made, every glance she cast at the water suggested knowledge he did not possess. It was humbling, though he would not admit it aloud. Finally she spoke. "Look at the water," she said, pointing to a section of the river where the current twisted around submerged rocks. "See how it swirls here. That is not safe. A man could be pulled under before he even notices." Her voice was calm, yet firm, carrying the authority of someone who had learned from years of observing nature. Eli leaned closer, squinting at the water. He could see the faint whirlpools forming, subtle but deadly. He realized that all his experience, all his confidence, might not be enough to navigate this river alone. He swallowed hard, feeling a mix of respect and unease. "I didn't realize it was that dangerous," he admitted quietly. Pride was a stubborn companion, but there was no room for arrogance here. The river demanded respect. He watched her closely, noticing how she scanned the area, assessing the flow, the rocks, and the edges where hidden depths could trap an unwary traveler. Every movement she made was precise, measured, and intentional. She knew this river like a story she had lived 100 times, and she was about to teach him that story. The woman stepped closer to the edge, her boots barely disturbing the earth, and began to explain. "Rivers have moods," she said almost poetically. "Some days they are gentle, almost friendly. Other days they are cruel and unforgiving. You cannot judge them by what you see on the surface. You must watch, listen, and understand." Eli nodded slowly. He had always thought of rivers as obstacles, challenges to overcome, but she was teaching him to see them as living, changing forces, something to respect, not just conquer. As they walked along the bank, she showed him how to read the water's flow. "See the patterns?" she asked. "The waves, the eddies, the bubbles, these are clues. They tell you where it is safe and where death hides beneath the surface." Eli leaned in, studying the water carefully. He realized he had ignored these subtle signs in the past, relying too much on brute strength and skill. Today, he needed patience, observation, and the humility to accept guidance. Each step they took together became a lesson in survival, in awareness, and in trust. While they moved, she shared stories of travelers who had ignored the river's warning. "A man once tried to cross here alone," she said softly. "He was strong and experienced like you. He thought he knew everything the land could throw at him, but he underestimated the river. The current took him." Only a piece of his wagon was ever found. Eli felt a shiver run down his spine. The story was not meant to frighten him, but to impress upon him the seriousness of the journey. He had heard tales of lost travelers before, but hearing it from someone who had lived and seen the land up close made it real. The woman continued, explaining more hidden dangers: sudden drops beneath the water, logs caught under rocks that could sweep a man off his feet, and deep holes where a single misstep could be fatal. "You see, a man cannot fight the river with strength alone," she said. "He must respect it, understand it, and move with it, not against it." Eli's mind worked hard, taking in every word. He had always believed that courage and strength were enough, but here he learned that wisdom and careful observation were equally vital. Hours passed as they moved along the riverbank. The sun climbed higher, casting golden light over the land, and Eli felt the sweat bead on his forehead. The woman never rushed, never panicked, and never faltered. Her calmness was contagious, and slowly he found himself matching her pace and her careful attention to detail. They paused at a shallow section where the water flowed gently over a wide bed of stones. "This is a possible crossing point," she said, pointing to a narrow path between rocks, "but only if you follow each step carefully." Eli studied the stones, noticing how some were slippery, others wobbled beneath the weight of a horse or a man. It was a delicate balance, and he understood that one wrong move could be fatal. As they prepared to cross, the woman handed him a simple wooden staff. "Use this to feel the depth and check for sudden drops," she instructed. Eli gripped it, appreciating the practicality of her knowledge. Every action she took was rooted in survival, in experience passed down through generations. It was a reminder that the land was alive with lessons, and only those willing to learn could navigate it safely. While testing the river's flow with the staff, Eli felt the first true fear of the day. The current tugged at the wood, stronger than he had anticipated. He realized that his strength alone would not be enough to withstand the river's hidden force. He glanced at the woman, who stood calmly, her eyes on the water, as if reading its intentions. She nodded slightly, acknowledging his understanding. It was not a moment of pride or triumph, but a moment of recognition, that he needed guidance, that he could survive only by respecting the river and trusting her knowledge. The woman also pointed out animal signs along the bank: broken branches, footprints, and fur caught in rocks. "Animals know where it is safe to cross," she explained. "They listen to the water in ways we cannot. Observe them, learn from them. Nature has a language if you are willing to listen." Eli leaned closer, noticing a family of deer stepping cautiously along the river's edge. Their movements were careful, deliberate. He realized that he had often ignored these lessons in the past, rushing through the land without seeing its subtle warnings. Today, he was learning to move with attention and respect. As they continued along the river, clouds gathered in the distance, darkening the horizon. The wind carried a stronger scent of rain, and Eli could feel the tension building in the air. He knew that a sudden storm could turn the river into a dangerous torrent. Yet, the woman remained calm, seemingly unaffected by the looming threat. Her confidence was not blind, it was grounded in knowledge and experience. Watching her, Eli understood that true strength was not about bravado but about awareness and preparation. She paused by a large rock, crouching down to examine the ground. "See these marks?" she asked. "Animals often test the river before crossing. Look at how their hooves press into the mud. They tell you where the riverbed is stable and where it is treacherous." Eli leaned down, examining the marks. He could see the difference, the subtle signs that would have gone unnoticed to an untrained eye. He realized that every detail mattered. In these lands, survival depended on noticing what others overlooked. Hours passed, yet Eli did not grow tired in the same way he had before. Each moment was filled with learning, observation, and respect for the woman's guidance. He began to feel a sense of connection with her, a bond built on trust and shared purpose. She was teaching him not just how to cross the river, but how to approach life with attention, patience, and humility. It was a lesson deeper than any he had encountered before. Finally, they reached a section of the river where the current slowed, a place where crossing seemed possible. The woman stopped, her gaze meeting his. "Here," she said, "is where you must begin. Each step matters. Do not rush. Listen to the river, feel its pull, and follow my guidance." Eli nodded, gripping his staff tightly. He felt a mixture of anticipation and fear, but also a quiet confidence. He knew that with her guidance, he had a chance to survive where he might have failed alone. Before stepping into the water, he glanced back at the plains he had traveled. The sun was high now, casting long shadows over the grass and rocks. The journey had been long, filled with lessons and warnings, and yet it was only the beginning. He realized that the river was more than a physical challenge. It was a test of respect, patience, and understanding. And he knew that by listening to this woman, he was learning something far more valuable than merely crossing from one side to the other. With a deep breath, Eli placed his first foot into the shallow water, feeling the cool current brush against his boots. He could feel the river's power, subtle but persistent, and he knew that each step forward would require his full attention. The woman stepped beside him, guiding him silently, her eyes scanning the water for hidden dangers. Together, they moved carefully, teaching and learning from one another, a man and a woman bound by a common goal: survival and respect for the land. By the time they paused for a moment on a slightly higher rock, Eli felt a sense of achievement he had rarely known. He had survived the initial test, learned to observe the river, and understood the importance of guidance and humility. The woman nodded at him, a small smile crossing her face. It was a gesture of approval, recognition of his effort and willingness to learn. For Eli, it was a moment of growth, a turning point in a journey that would teach him lessons far beyond the river itself. And so, the rancher and the Apache woman continued along the riverbank, their steps careful, their minds alert, and their hearts full of respect for the land they walked. Each moment was a lesson, each movement a test, and Eli began to understand that this journey was not merely about reaching the other side. It was about learning to see, to listen, and to survive in a world where nature and wisdom were the greatest guides of all. The river stretched before them, wide and glimmering in the afternoon sun. Eli Harper stood at the edge of the bank, gripping the wooden staff the Apache woman had given him. Every muscle in his body was alert, every sense tuned to the subtle movements of the water. He had learned much from her over the past hours: how to read the river, how to notice hidden currents, and how to respect the power of the land. But now came the moment that truly tested his courage and his understanding. The woman, whose name Eli had learned was Aeon, stepped beside him. Her presence was calm, steady, and reassuring. She did not speak at first, letting him absorb the rhythm of the river, the sound of the water rushing over rocks, and the gentle sway of the reeds along the bank. Her eyes scanned the surface, catching movements that Eli could barely see. She pointed to a dark swirl near a cluster of stones. "That is a whirlpool," she said quietly. "It may not look dangerous, but it can pull a man under before he even notices." Eli felt a shiver run through him. He had faced challenges before, from storms to steep cliffs, but this river demanded something different. It demanded patience, careful observation, and trust in someone who knew its secrets. He looked at Aeon, seeing the calm in her eyes, and realized that fear alone would not guide him safely across. He needed knowledge, focus, and respect. Step by step, Aeon led him toward the shallower part of the river. She stopped at each critical point, pointing out rocks hidden beneath the surface, slippery stones, and areas where the current could sweep a man away. Eli leaned on his staff, testing the depth and the strength of the flow. Each time he felt the tug of the water against his boots, a reminder that even shallow water could be deadly if underestimated. "You must move slowly," Aeon instructed. "Do not rush. Listen to the river and feel its pull. One wrong step can change everything." Eli nodded, taking a deep breath. His hands were steady now, but his heart raced with anticipation. This was more than a physical challenge. It was a test of his ability to learn and trust. He had never crossed a river with someone guiding him in this way, and the lesson was both humbling and enlightening. As they moved forward, the water reached Eli's knees. He could feel the current tugging against his legs, trying to unbalance him. He planted his feet carefully, testing each stone before trusting it with his weight. Aeon mirrored his movements, always just a step ahead, watching and guiding. Every time Eli hesitated, she offered a calm hand or a subtle gesture, teaching him to trust his instincts while respecting the river's power. "Watch the eddies," Aeon said, pointing to swirling water near a larger rock. "They are small but strong. Step into one and it can twist you off balance. Step around it and you move safely." Eli followed her instructions carefully, feeling the truth in her words. He realized that the river, like life, had hidden dangers that only experience and careful observation could reveal. It was not enough to be strong or confident. Survival required patience, attentiveness, and humility. The current grew stronger as they moved closer to the center. Eli felt the water tug at his legs and horse, a powerful reminder of the river's force. He gripped his staff tighter and followed Aeon's lead. She moved with grace and precision, her feet finding solid ground where his own might slip. Eli marveled at her skill, understanding for the first time that her knowledge was the result of years of experience and respect for the land. He felt both gratitude and determination. Gratitude for her guidance and determination to follow her instructions exactly. Halfway across, Eli nearly lost his balance. A hidden stone beneath the water shifted under his weight, sending a sudden jolt through his body. He stumbled and the current tugged at him. Panic threatened to rise, but Aeon was immediately at his side, steadying him with a firm hand on his arm. "Focus," she said calmly. "Feel the river, not fight it. It is not your enemy." Eli took a deep breath, centering himself. He realized that his struggle against the water had been the wrong approach. The river was not something to be conquered with force. It was something to be understood and respected. He planted his feet carefully, feeling the flow around him, and took the next step. The current still tugged, but he moved with awareness, guided by both Aeon and his own growing understanding of the river's moods. As they progressed, Aeon shared more wisdom. "This river has many hidden threats," she explained. "Rocks, holes, and whirlpools. But it also teaches patience, observation, and respect. You cannot force your way across. You must move with care and listen to the land." Eli absorbed every word, feeling the truth in her voice. He realized that crossing the river was not just a physical challenge, but a lesson in humility and awareness, qualities he had never fully embraced before. The deeper they went, the more Eli noticed the subtle signs of the river's power. Leaves and small branches floated in the current, swirling around rocks and eddies. Small fish darted beneath the surface, moving with the flow. Even the sound of the water seemed to change depending on the depth and strength of the current. Aeon pointed out each detail, teaching Eli to see what he had never noticed before. Every small observation became crucial, every step deliberate and measured. Suddenly, a stronger pull caught Eli off guard. A hidden whirlpool tugged at his boots and he stumbled. The water rushed around him, threatening to pull him down. His heart raced, and for a moment he felt a pang of fear he had not expected. But Aeon was there instantly, her hand steadying him, guiding him to balance. "Do not panic," she said calmly. "The river is strong, but so are you if you respect it." Eli adjusted his footing, planting the staff firmly against a rock beneath the surface. He felt the current against him, but this time he did not resist blindly. He moved with the water, letting it guide him while maintaining control. Step by step, he regained his balance, his respect for the river growing with each movement. He realized that fear, when controlled and paired with knowledge, could become a tool rather than a hindrance. The horse, too, was careful. Its hooves tested each stone and ledge, guided by Aeon's instructions and Eli's commands. The bond between man, horse, and river became apparent as each moved with awareness, reacting to subtle shifts in the water and the terrain. Eli marveled at the coordination required, the trust necessary to survive this crossing. It was not just a test of strength, but of patience, observation, and harmony with nature. By late afternoon, they were nearly across. The river had tested them at every step, but Eli felt a growing sense of accomplishment. He had learned to observe, to respect, and to follow guidance without hesitation. He realized that his pride had almost been his downfall, but by embracing humility, he had gained not only safety but wisdom. Each step forward was a lesson etched into his memory, a reminder that survival required more than skill. It required understanding and respect. The final stretch was the most dangerous. The current deepened, and hidden rocks threatened to destabilize their footing. Eli's muscles ached, his hands gripped the staff tightly, and his heart pounded. Yet with Aeon by his side, he moved carefully, trusting her knowledge and his own growing awareness. Every step demanded focus, every movement deliberate. The river no longer felt like an enemy. It was a teacher, testing his patience, attention, and understanding. At last, they reached a point where the water was shallow enough to step onto solid ground. Eli breathed a long, deep sigh, feeling the tension leave his body. He had crossed the river, not through sheer strength alone, but through respect, observation, and guidance. He turned to Aeon, gratitude evident in his eyes. "I would not have made it without you," he said quietly. She nodded, acknowledging both his words and his growth. For a moment they stood together on the far bank, watching the river behind them. It flowed steadily, unchanging yet alive with power, a reminder of the lessons it had imparted. Eli understood that this crossing was more than a physical challenge. It was a test of character, patience, and humility. He had learned to see beyond his own experience, to trust knowledge passed through generations, and to respect the land in ways he had never done before. Aeon looked at him and smiled faintly. "Remember this lesson," she said. "The land, the water, and all living things teach us if we are willing to listen. Pride can be dangerous, but respect can save your life." Eli nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. He had faced the river and survived, but he had also gained wisdom that would guide him for the rest of his days. As they began to move away from the riverbank, Eli felt a deep sense of connection to the land, to the woman who had guided him, and to the lessons he had learned. The journey had tested his strength, patience, and courage, but it had also opened his mind to understanding and respect. He realized that survival was not just about enduring hardship, but about learning, observing, and growing with every step. Together, the rancher and the Apache woman walked further into the plains, their shadows stretching long in the afternoon sun. Each step was careful, deliberate, and filled with the quiet knowledge that the river had taught them both something invaluable. Eli Harper, once proud and self-reliant, had gained not only safety, but insight into the true meaning of strength, humility, and respect for the world around him. And in that moment, as the wind whispered across the plains and the river flowed behind them, Eli understood that some lessons could only be learned when a man was willing to listen, and that true courage often lay in humility, patience, and trust. The afternoon sun was beginning. Its slow descent toward the horizon, casting long golden shadows across the plains. Eli Harper and Aeon had successfully crossed the river, but the journey was far from over. As they moved further along the bank, the landscape grew wilder, less predictable. Trees and brush thickened, and the path became uneven, riddled with hidden rocks and sudden dips in the earth. Eli felt the weight of the river crossing still in his muscles, the exhaustion creeping in, but he also felt a sense of determination he had not known before. He had survived the first trial, but the land had more tests to offer. Aeon walked ahead, her steps careful and precise, her eyes scanning the surroundings. "The river is not the only danger," she said softly. "The land itself has many traps. Some are natural, some are left by those who do not respect it." Eli nodded, listening intently. He had already learned the value of humility and observation, and he realized that the day's lessons were far from over. Every step forward required awareness and patience, qualities he had only begun to understand. As they moved deeper into the plains, Eli noticed subtle signs of wildlife. Broken branches, disturbed soil, and tracks in the mud told stories of animals that had passed through before them. Aeon stopped occasionally to point out these signs, explaining what they indicated about the land and its hidden dangers. "See this," she said, pointing to a faint trail. "A fox crossed here recently. It avoided certain areas where the ground is soft and could trap a foot. Animals know the land, we must learn from them." Eli studied the trail, noticing what he had overlooked before. Every small detail mattered. Survival depended on noticing the signs that others might miss. Suddenly, a distant rumble of thunder echoed across the plains. Eli glanced at the sky. Dark clouds were gathering quickly, moving faster than the sun's descent. The wind shifted, stronger now, carrying the scent of rain and the earth. Aeon paused, her gaze on the horizon. "A storm is coming," she said calmly. "We must find shelter, or the river we just crossed will be nothing compared to what's ahead." Eli's heart quickened. He had faced storms before, but never one that seemed to approach with such speed and intensity. The river had tested his patience and courage, but the storm would test his endurance and quick thinking. He looked at Aeon, seeing the same calm determination in her eyes that he had witnessed all day. She moved with purpose, guiding him toward a cluster of large boulders partially hidden among the brush. "We can take shelter here," she said. "It will protect us from the wind and the first waves of rain." The two hurried toward the rocks, the wind now strong enough to tug at their clothing and hair. Eli could feel the storm's energy building in the air, the tension almost electric. He reached the rocks and crouched behind them, his heart pounding but his mind alert. Aeon followed, setting down a small bundle she had carried. "We must wait it out," she said. "The storm will pass, but we must respect its strength while it rages." Eli nodded, grateful for her guidance. He had learned that survival was not just about moving forward, it was about knowing when to pause, observe, and prepare. As the storm broke, rain fell in heavy sheets, drumming against the rocks and soaking the earth around them. The wind howled, bending trees and whipping the plains into a frenzy. Eli felt the full force of nature pressing down, a reminder of the power he had faced and barely survived. He watched as the river they had crossed earlier began to swell in the distance, its waters rising rapidly, a dangerous reminder of how quickly the land could change. Aeon crouched beside him, unbothered by the rain. "The storm will not last forever," she said, "but we must be ready. The land teaches patience and preparation. Those who ignore it are often lost." Eli shivered, not from the cold but from the realization of how fragile life could be in these lands. The storm was a challenge unlike any he had faced that day, a test of endurance, observation, and calm under pressure. Hours passed as they waited for the storm to subside. Eli felt exhausted, soaked to the bone, but he also felt a growing sense of understanding. He had survived the river crossing, learned from Aeon, and now faced the storm with patience and attention. He realized that strength alone could not save him. It was knowledge, awareness, and respect that had guided him through the day. When the rain finally eased, the plains were transformed. The river had risen, the earth was muddy and slick, and fallen branches littered their path. Eli took a deep breath, feeling the scent of wet earth and rain. "We should move carefully," Aeon said. "The land has changed." Hidden dangers may be underfoot, and the river's swell could trap anyone who is careless. Eli nodded, gripping his staff tightly. Every step now required caution and focus. The lessons of the day were proving invaluable. As they moved forward, Eli spotted something glinting in the mud ahead. He bent down and carefully lifted it. It was a small, sharp rock, partially hidden beneath a puddle. He realized that this was exactly what Aeon had warned him about, hidden hazards that could trip a man or worse. He placed it aside, noting the importance of observation and preparation. "I understand now," he said quietly. "Even the smallest detail matters." Aeon smiled faintly, acknowledging his growing awareness. Suddenly, the sound of rushing water caught their attention. Eli's heart skipped a beat as he saw a small creek, swollen from the storm, rushing across their path. It was deeper and faster than it had appeared before, and he realized that crossing it alone would be dangerous. "We cannot risk it alone," Aeon said firmly. "We must work together, or one mistake could cost us dearly." Eli nodded, feeling a surge of trust in her guidance. He had learned that the day was not about pride, but about survival, teamwork, and awareness. They carefully made their way across the creek, Aeon leading and Eli following closely, testing each rock and movement. The water tugged at their boots and legs, but with careful steps and attention, they reached the other side safely. Eli felt a sense of accomplishment, tempered by the knowledge that the land was never to be underestimated. Each obstacle was a reminder that nature demanded respect, and that survival required both skill and humility. As they continued, the sun began to set, painting the sky with reds, oranges, and purples. The plains were quiet now, the storm passed but leaving signs of its power everywhere. Fallen branches, pools of water, and shifted earth marked their path. Eli felt a mixture of relief and reflection. The day had tested him in ways he had never anticipated. The river, the storm, and the changing terrain had challenged not just his strength, but his patience, observation, and understanding. Aeon stopped on a small rise, her eyes scanning the plains. "We are almost at the area where the cattle graze," she said. "But there is one last challenge ahead. A small canyon lies ahead, and it is easy to misstep and fall. We must move slowly and carefully." Eli followed her gaze, seeing the canyon in the fading light. The edges were unstable, the rocks loose, and the drop dangerous. He felt a rush of nervous energy, but also a quiet determination. He had come this far, learned so much, and now he would face the final test before reaching safety. Step by step, they approached the canyon. Aeon demonstrated how to test the ground, where to place each foot, and how to use the staff for balance. Eli followed her guidance closely, feeling the importance of every movement. One misstep could mean a fall, but with patience, observation, and trust, they moved carefully across the precarious terrain. The canyon was narrow in parts, wide in others, with rocks jutting out like obstacles demanding attention. Eli felt his heart pound, but he also felt a growing sense of confidence. He had survived the river, endured the storm, and now faced this challenge with the lessons of the day firmly in mind. Midway through the canyon, a rock shifted under Eli's foot, sending a jolt of fear through him. He caught himself just in time, gripping his staff and stabilizing his footing. Aeon was immediately beside him, her hand steadying his arm. "Do not panic," she said calmly. "Focus, breathe, and trust your movements." Eli obeyed, taking a deep breath and carefully stepping forward. The lesson was clear. Fear was natural, but control, observation, and guidance would see him through. By the time they reached the far side of the canyon, the sky was darkening, stars beginning to appear. Eli looked back at the path they had traveled, the river, the storm, the canyon, and felt a profound sense of accomplishment. He had faced danger, learned humility, and survived because he had listened, observed, and trusted guidance. Aeon looked at him, her expression calm but approving. "You have learned well today," she said. The land teaches us, but only those willing to listen truly survive. Eli nodded, feeling the truth of her words settle deeply within him. He realized that the day had been about far more than reaching the other side of a river. It had been about respect for the land, patience, observation, and trust. It had been about humility and courage, about knowing when to move forward and when to pause. And it had been about understanding that survival was not just physical, it was mental, emotional, and spiritual. As they continued toward the grazing fields, Eli felt a sense of peace he had not known in years. The plains, the river, the storm, and the canyon had all tested him, but he had learned to face each challenge with respect, focus, and trust. Aeon walked beside him, a quiet guide and teacher, sharing her wisdom through actions and words. And as the stars fully emerged in the night sky, Eli understood that he had grown in ways that would stay with him forever, stronger, wiser, and more aware of the world around him. The journey was not yet over, but the lessons of the day were clear. Humility, patience, observation, and respect were the keys to survival. And with these lessons, Eli Harper was ready to face whatever the plains, rivers, and storms of life would place before him next. The night was calm now, the storm long past, leaving the plains washed and sparkling under a sky filled with stars. Eli Harper and Aeon walked slowly, their shadows stretching long across the grass. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the faint scent of wet earth and wildflowers. After the river, the storm, and the treacherous canyon, the plains seemed almost peaceful. Yet Eli knew better. The land was beautiful, but it demanded respect, patience, and constant awareness. He had learned this firsthand over the past hours, and the lessons weighed on him more than any exhaustion from the day's journey. As they approached the grazing fields where Eli's cattle roamed, he could hear the soft lowing of the animals in the distance. Relief washed over him, but it was mingled with reflection. Every step he had taken, every challenge he had faced, had taught him something invaluable. The river had tested his courage, the storm had tested his endurance, and the canyon had tested his patience and focus. Through it all, Aeon had guided him, teaching not only survival but respect for the land and for knowledge passed down through generations. Eli slowed his pace, taking in the sight of his cattle grazing peacefully under the faint light of the stars. They were unaware of the dangers he had faced to reach them, their calm a stark contrast to the chaos of the river and storm earlier in the day. He felt a swell of gratitude for their safety, for his own life, and for the woman who had guided him through perilous terrain. He turned to Aeon, the firelight of a distant camp flickering behind her features. "I can't thank you enough," he said quietly. "I would never have made it without your guidance." Aeon nodded, her expression calm but filled with quiet approval. "You listened and observed," she said. "You respected the land and trusted guidance. That is why you survived." Many men cross rivers, face storms, and climb canyons, yet fail because they rely only on strength. Knowledge and humility are more powerful than brute force. Eli considered her words, feeling their weight and truth. He had always been proud, relying on his skill and courage, but today had shown him that true survival required something more, something deeper than strength. They reached the edge of the grazing field, where the soft earth was marked by the prints of Eli's horse and the gentle hoofsteps of the cattle. He paused, looking around at the open land, the animals, and the faint moonlight reflecting off puddles left by the storm. "I have spent my life on these plains," he said softly, "yet today I've learned more than I ever have about them, about patience, observation, and respect." Aeon smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting the light of the stars. "The land teaches, but only those willing to listen truly learn. You listened, Eli Harper." As they moved among the cattle, Eli noticed how each step required careful attention. Even in the calm grazing field, hidden dangers remained. He saw broken branches, small dips in the earth, and uneven ground that could trip a man or horse. The lessons of the day had sharpened his awareness. He realized that survival was not only about navigating rivers, storms, and canyons. It was about seeing what others overlooked, respecting what others ignored, and understanding the world on a deeper level. Aeon guided him to a small clearing where the ground was flat and dry, suitable for him to rest his horse and inspect his supplies. "It is safe here for the night," she said. "Tomorrow, you will continue to your ranch and you will remember these lessons." Nature is always teaching, and pride alone can be dangerous. Eli nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. He had faced death, challenges, and fear, but he had survived because he had been willing to learn. Today had changed him, not only as a rancher but as a man. He dismounted carefully, patting his horse's neck and whispering a few words of thanks for its endurance. The animal had carried him safely through the river, the storm, and the canyon, guided by Aeon's wisdom and Eli's growing awareness. He realized that strength alone would not have been enough. It was knowledge, careful observation, patience, and respect for both the land and its creatures that had ensured his survival. Eli looked at Aeon again. "Will you stay a while?" he asked. "I want to hear more to learn more." Aeon shook her head gently. "I cannot stay. The land calls me to other paths, other lessons to teach, but you now carry these lessons with you. Remember them, pass them on, and you will survive in ways others cannot." Her words were like a promise, a reminder that wisdom is not only for the present but for the future as well. As Aeon prepared to leave, Eli felt a mixture of sadness and respect. She had been his guide, his teacher, and in a way, his protector. Her presence had transformed a dangerous, uncertain journey into a path of learning and survival. He realized that the lessons of the day would stay with him for a lifetime. He had learned about rivers, storms, and canyons, but more importantly, he had learned about humility, patience, and the quiet strength of listening. The stars shone brightly overhead as Aeon stepped onto a path leading away from the field. She turned once, looking back at Eli, her figure silhouetted against the night sky. "Live with respect for the land," she said softly. "It will reward you, and it will teach you if you are willing to learn." Then she was gone, fading into the darkness, leaving Eli standing alone in the calm of the night, the plains stretching endlessly before him. Eli took a deep breath, feeling the cool night air fill his lungs. He watched the cattle grazing, their gentle movements a symbol of life continuing amidst danger and uncertainty. He thought of the river, the storm, the canyon, and the challenges that had tested him. Each had taught him something different, but together they had formed a lesson far greater than any he had learned in years of living on the plains. Survival was more than strength. It was awareness, patience, respect, and trust. He spent the night in the clearing, tending to his horse and supplies. The firelight flickered softly against the rocks, casting shadows that danced across the ground. Eli reflected on the journey, thinking about each step, each warning, each lesson Aeon had shared. He realized that the true value of today was not just in surviving, but in growing, becoming a man who understood the land, who respected its power, and who could navigate danger with knowledge and humility. When the first light of dawn touched the horizon, Eli was ready to continue. He mounted his horse, feeling the animal's strength beneath him, and looked toward his ranch. The journey ahead would still be long, but he now carried more than supplies and courage. He carried the wisdom of the land, the guidance of Aeon, and the understanding that true survival comes from more than force alone. As he rode across the plains, the sun rising behind him, Eli felt a deep sense of connection to the land, to the lessons he had learned, and to the woman who had guided him through danger. The river, the storm, and the canyon were no longer merely obstacles. They were teachers, shaping him into someone wiser, more patient, and more aware. Each moment of the journey had contributed to this transformation, and Eli knew that he would carry these lessons for the rest of his life. By the time he reached the edge of his ranch, the day fully brightened with sunlight, Eli felt a quiet pride, not of accomplishment alone, but of growth and understanding. He had faced fear, danger, and uncertainty, and he had survived. But more importantly, he had learned how to live with respect for the land, humility in his actions, and trust in knowledge that came from experience and observation. These lessons were more valuable than any material reward, more powerful than any skill he had previously relied upon. Eli spent the day tending to his cattle, repairing fences, and preparing his ranch for the coming seasons. Yet throughout it all, he carried the memory of the journey, the river's currents, the storm's fury, the canyon's precarious edges, and Aeon's calm guidance. He thought often of her words, the quiet wisdom that had saved his life and reshaped his understanding of the land. He knew that every challenge in life, every obstacle, could be faced successfully if approached with patience, respect, and awareness. As the sun set on that day, Eli stood at the edge of his land, looking out across the plains he had always called home. The world seemed different now, not more dangerous but more alive, filled with lessons waiting to be discovered. He had crossed rivers, endured storms, and faced challenges he would never forget. But he had also learned the power of listening, observing, and respecting forces greater than himself. These were lessons he would carry always, guiding him through every path and challenge that lay ahead. And though Aeon had vanished into the plains, her presence remained in Eli's heart. He remembered her calm eyes, her steady voice, and her wisdom, understanding that survival and growth were not merely matters of strength, but of respect, patience, and the courage to learn. As the stars appeared once again in the night sky, Eli Harper knew that he had been forever changed. He had survived, yes, but he had also learned, grown, and become a man who understood that the true power of life lay in humility, observation, and respect. The rancher turned toward his home, the peaceful lowing of the cattle welcoming him back. He mounted his horse one last time for the day, feeling the weight of experience and knowledge settle within him. The plains stretched wide and open, filled with unseen challenges and hidden beauty. But Eli Harper was ready. He had faced danger and survived, learned lessons that would last a lifetime, and understood that true courage was not only in action, but in listening, learning, and respecting the world around him. And so, the rancher continued his life on the plains, forever changed by the river, the storm, the canyon, and the Apache woman who had stopped him and taught him the most valuable lesson of all, that survival and wisdom go hand in hand, and that the world rewards those who observe, respect, and learn.